Hola friends, welcome to the Medicine, Marriage, and Money YouTube channel, the only channel for physicians who want to achieve marital interdependence and financial freedom together. On this channel, you will learn how to show up as the best version of yourself so that you can love intentionally and build a more financially savvy relationship with your spouse. And I am your host, a physician mom, a doctor's wife, a Gottman leader, a certified life and marriage coach, Dr. Kate Mangona. Welcome. Bienvenidos.
When we get into marriage, and you know this, our philosophies, our upbringing, our money scripts really influence how we manage our finances. And those may be similar, but they also may have varying opinions. And when we get into the money aspect of it, it's how do I even choose my partner in my financial decisions, in how I am thinking about spending my money, using my money, investing my money so that it not only serves me, but it also serves my partner.
Hello, sweet friends. Welcome to another episode of Medicine, Marriage, and Money, where I have a very special guest that I met earlier this year at the White Coat Investor Conference. You guys are going to have the pleasure to meet Dr. Brittne Halford. Dr. Brittne is an internal medicine physician, originally from Flint, Michigan, and attended the University of Michigan, Go Blue, for college. She completed medical school at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine, where she also completed a master's degree of public health. Now she's located in Boston and works as an academic hospitalist. In addition to medicine, Dr. Halford is an entrepreneur and co-founder of the Bremlin and Rose, a satin-lined hair accessories brand for women and children. And she has an Instagram handle she'll share later. She also shares her passion for personal finance and building generational wealth with others through her YouTube channel and financial coaching business. More joy, more wealth. Dr. Halford shares her experience with paying off $138,000 of student loans in 3 years and helps women obtain more joy in their lives through tailored money management strategies. She is a wife and a mother to her children, Brooke and KJ. And I'm so happy because joy is definitely one of my themes too. Welcome, Dr. Brittne Halford. Yay!
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes. Thanks for coming on. Tell us first, let's just start out with telling us let's get the hardest question out of the way. What is your definition of marital interdependence? You've had 8 years of experience. No.
Yes. When I think about marriage, we often get into marriage because of this sentiment of love, right? We feel the warm fuzzies, the butterflies. Oh, this person is attractive. But when you're in the thick of marriage, that definition of love changes. And it's really choosing to sacrifice or choosing to operate in a manner that is pleasing and serves the other person despite what you feel. And so I really believe that definition of love, of making an active decision to choose your partner over yourself, is really what is marital interdependence. And I was actually just working with a coaching client. When we get into marriage, and you know this, our philosophies, our upbringing, our money scripts really influence how we manage our finances. And those may be similar, but they also may have varying opinions. And when we get into the money aspect of it, it's how do I even choose my partner in my financial decisions, in how I am thinking about spending my money, using my money, investing my money so that it not only serves me, but it also serves my partner. And it can be very difficult at times to choose to love them after, the romance may be at a low point at that time in the marriage, or after they've done something that you just don't agree with or don't appreciate. But for me, at least, making those active decisions to choose to love my partner always has a return on an investment for my marriage, for my family, and even for myself. Sometimes you don't see it. It's not immediate, but it definitely has a long-term return on investment.
Now, you bring up a really good point. Then I definitely believe in the power of choice, and especially in marriage and your relationships and choosing your partner. Okay, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, Brittne.
Okay.
So say, because there are people out there that are like, well, don't you become selfless? Like, wouldn't you lose yourself? Like, if you choosing your partner, isn't that becoming like subservient or putting yourself down? And like, what does that look like? And can you give us an example from your own relationship or maybe one of your clients' relationships where they did this and it did serve them well instead of kept them down?
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic question. I do believe that there is some submission that occurs in marriage. And I am a woman of faith. And so I believe that from a biblical perspective. But how I reconcile that difference is that my husband is responsible to the higher being above. And so that's his duty to actually love me. So it's reciprocal in that way, right? But even in choosing to love someone, to make an active decision, I think by having that agency of choice, you're not obligated to do it. You are actively making that decision. You are empowering yourself to behave in a way that ultimately serves the common good, that ultimately creates peace. One of my mentors, she encouraged me to do Brené Brown core values. And I don't know if you've done this, Kate, but
I haven't done it, but I've been interested in it.
It is so hard because there are this list of words, and a lot of the words are similar, like honesty, integrity, trustworthiness, family. And for me, she wants you to distill it down to only 2 words that you can really identify as your core values. And it was so challenging. It took me like literally weeks. And what I came to as my 2 words were integrity and personal fulfillment. So one could say that I'm like sacrificing myself by choosing to, say things in a more softer tone to my husband after he's made me mad, right? Or to use the sandwich method, in communication of feedback.
Yep.
Because I'm typically like a straight shooter. Like, all right, what I see, I interpret it, and then you get an output. So it takes some energy for me to actually do that. But in that way, I'm also fulfilling a personal goal because I don't like to hurt people's feelings sometimes with me just saying it like it is and just being unfiltered and giving it, giving that feedback. So I am personally fulfilling a goal to be softer, to make sure that my words land softly, but still have the impact that I intended, because usually my intent is good. And so for anyone who's struggling with trying to serve someone else while also serving themselves, I would just ask you to reframe that and to think about what is the positive outcome and the benefit to yourself, because I guarantee you'll be able to find one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, because it's like you're really choosing to serve them, but in the end, you're served as well. I mean, it's just like the whole circle of the beautiful relationship. It's not choosing one over the other or putting one's lesser than the other. It's just a balance, and it's a balance between you and your partner. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Can you speak, and I like how you bring in your faith aspect. You're a woman of God. Can you speak a little bit about the wage gap? And I don't even know if you can relate the two or not, but in my head, I'm just like, oh, is this related? The masculine and the feminine and at home, and then you've got the masculine and feminine in the workplace, right? And so is that somehow our roles at home get translated to the workplace, and why there's a wage gap, and how can we fix that, and what you've done in your efforts?
Yeah. So let me process this a little bit to see if there is a connection. I mean, we know that even women who are breadwinners still do more in the home. We know that. And I recently read an article that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine about how women take on these non-promotable roles, as far as making contributions to the social engagement group or the physician wellness group, which are so impactful for our communities, our medical communities, our groups, our divisions. Because if you have high turnover, then thinking about it from a business perspective, then that means that they have to bring in someone else. They have to recruit them. They may ask for a sign-on bonus or something like that. And so there's going to be a higher expense to hiring someone new opposed to retaining someone who's already there and doing a good job.
Oh, absolutely. You don't have to convince me. I know it costs like $1 million to replace a physician.
Yes. So there is a direct financial correlation to the work that we do, even though for some, it may be deemed as non-promotable activities. And I think that women, we have a really unique opportunity to leverage just who we are as women and how we process things in our caring and nurturing state. And, define us however we choose. If you want to be bold and a badass woman, then that's your definition of woman. If you want to express yourself softly and be graceful and caring, then that's your definition of woman. And I think that we should not necessarily be defined societally or in the home by specific roles. But wherever you are, whoever you are, and what are your expertise, then I think that there's an opportunity to articulate that and that benefit so that you're speaking to the interests of those who make decisions regarding finances, etc. It is our duty to advocate for ourselves and also to ask, because I do think that sometimes it is not so malevolent in the oblivion. I think some of us is just because we don't have those experiences. We don't have that background that we can be unaware of the plight of another person. And I do believe that it is also our responsibility to express that this is something that we want, to ask our counterparts who might be a white male, who may be able to sit in the C-suite or get access to individuals who can advocate for us and be an ally. And for us to be able to articulate what we're doing, whether it is just for financial wellness or for physician wellness, or, figuring out a way to make childcare just more accessible to those who work in the hospital. That may be seen non-promotable, but it has a financial return for those who are interested in the hospital. Remember, medicine is a business. Yes, we may work for nonprofits, but medicine is still a business. So I don't know if there's like a biblical correlation necessarily to the wealth gap that we're experiencing as women, but I do believe that there's a way in which we can draw in some of what we do domestically in the home and our skill sets as assets for us to help to bridge that gap.
Yes, I love it. I love that. And I love how you said, it's our duty to ask, right? Because sometimes men are better just asking for what they want. And while we might go into the physician wellness or social engagement groups, I'm like deemed as what am I? The social engagement officer, or I don't know. I've gotten all these terms given to me by different people at my work, but it's like, those you're right. I never thought about that. They're not really promotable positions. Like it's not like research, right? But it's helping the group and the health and the wellness. So yes, I need to advocate for myself and definitely can do that in my wellness corner, right? At like faculty meetings, teach the whole group, the men and the women, how to advocate for whichever groups, the men and the women. So, okay, that's beautiful. Can you tell me a little bit about your husband? Now, I know he's a psychiatrist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how does he, when you first met, was it 12 years ago?
That was 12 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Take us back. Tell me what was like, how did you guys first meet?
We were actually just talking about this recently because we live in Boston. And so we have a smaller condo with not as much storage space, but I at least will acknowledge that I have somewhat of a hoarder gene. I think there's been some imprinting, so it's not so strong as my mother's, but it's still there.
Yes. Yeah.
And so our closet broke. It just collapsed, and so all the clothes went onto the floor, and there was a portion of it that was still functional, but our handyman, he's like, no, I need the entire closet empty if you want this to be fixed properly. So I'm like taking the clothes and loading them onto the bed. We literally slept on the floor and on the couch for 2 days because there were so many clothes on the bed.
Okay, not bad. 2 days is not bad.
So as we were sorting through our clothes, because we're like, it doesn't make sense to put everything back. It's just going to break again. Like, this is an opportunity for us to do some spring, midsummer cleaning. Okay. And he found the shirt, which is a purple plaid shirt that he was wearing when we met each other at the House of Blues on, I don't know if it was quite July 4th, but it was the July 4th weekend of 2011. And so he asked me, he's like, well, where is the purple skirt? Because I had on this purple feather skirt. And my best friend, so I am frugal Franny, have always been that way, will likely always be that way. But my best friend, she really loves fashion. So as she gets older and grows a little wider, it changes her shape. I've been consistent and I've worn the same size since 16. It's a blessing. And so she's passed along this skirt and she's like, oh, B, that's what she calls me. Oh, B, this is the lucky skirt. Like, you have to wear the skirt. Anytime I wear this skirt, it's a lucky skirt. And I met my husband on the day that I was wearing the lucky purple skirt. And so we were just, enjoying ourselves at the House of Blues. And he came over to me and he said, hey, are you medical students? Now, Kate, I have on my glasses now, but I had on my contacts and I had on this little feather skirt and my high heels. I didn't really think I looked like a medical student. I mean, I'm not trying to define, you're beautiful, right? And you look very fashionable, but like a typical medical student, I think looks a little nerdy.
You didn't have your books with you, your bags, your hair. Yes.
Like I'm out at a club. So I was like, yes. And apparently he was really good friends with one of my good friends. So they started to communicate. He and I danced during that night, but we exchanged no names and literally almost no words except for, are you a medical student? Yes. So he returns months later to visit his friend. And he's like, who's the tall girl who was with your friend? Now, I'm 5'7". My friend is about 5'1". So with my heels, I was probably more of almost 6 feet. And so I guess she is short compared to me because she typically doesn't wear heels.
Nice, your 5-inch heels, Brittne.
Oh my gosh. So I was the tall girl in the group, and then we exchanged numbers, and it's all downhill from there. So we met in a very just like traditional way of meeting at a bar.
That's so fun. And do you still have this lucky skirt?
I do. I thought that I had given it to my cousin because she's smaller than I am. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to wear this lucky skirt again. But I found it because we were cleaning out the closet. And so now I stored it away. We're storing his shirt away, and we'll leave it for our children. At least we'll bring it out periodically and we can remind them of how we met.
Yes, absolutely. Store that one away. I'm actually in the middle of cleaning out my closets, and I've got those watertight plastic tubs from like the Container Store kind of littering my hallway because I want to just there are certain things I'm not ready to give away. I mean, I'll give away a couple trash bags of stuff, but yes, I know you've got to do that every once in a while. Clean out the closets. Okay. So tell me about, what was it how'd you fall in love? Like, what quality was it about your husband that you fell in love with?
So one of the things that I fell in love with and continue to fall in love with is his ability to, one, be relaxed, because I'm very type A, he's very type B. So even before this podcast, I'm like, oh, they want quiet, because he's in there on his phone. And like, that he's like, yeah, Brittne, I've done podcasts before. I know how to be quiet. Like, you don't have to, you don't have to remind me of these things. And so he's always very relaxed. So in that way, we balance each other's out. And I grew up in a single mother household in Flint, Michigan. And I didn't realize this at the time, but we actually grew up in poverty. My mother, she shared with me her pay stub when she worked at the bank as a teller in 1997. And I don't remember the exact number. I think it was about maybe $600 for that pay stub. But then after you take out taxes and all of that, she was left with very little money. And I did the calculations, and we were actually living below the poverty line at that time for a family of 3. And I didn't realize it. My mother is extremely resourceful. So I didn't feel that I was poor. And she later got a better job and made more income. And so, that of course raised our household income. But growing up with her, who also, her mother was 16 when she had her. And so she grew up poor, and they grew up in Arkansas. Then I was raised with a scarcity mindset to evaluate the cost of everything and the value of nothing, and to always think of something in lack. Mm-hmm. My husband was not. My mother-in-law, she tells me even now, she's like, Brittne, don't think about the cost, because if you think about the cost, then you're not going to do it. So just do what you need to do, and you'll figure out the rest later. So he was born in that mindset, in that family and both of his sisters are nurse practitioners. He has numerous physicians and nurses in the family. I was the first in my family. And we balance each other out in that way, that he has literally manifested so many opportunities in which typically, if you were to read the eligibility criteria, and this is one of the differences between men and women that have been documented, but if you were to read the eligibility criteria for that position, my husband does not qualify. Like, he's missing a couple of those marks, but he's like, I'm going to apply anyways. In addition to applying, when I don't meet these criteria, I'm also going to ask that they, for example, when he started his fellowship at Boston Children's, he started in January instead of July, because I was pregnant and I didn't want to transition my care. And so he asked, say, hey, my wife is pregnant. I really do want this position, but would you be willing to wait so that I can start in January instead of July, so that my wife doesn't have to transition everything? And they said, okay. And that's just one example. When we moved to Boston, we had to pay our first month's rent, our last month's rent. And then we actually paid earlier because we found a really good place that had an elevator and a nice community with a lot of parks. And so we started to pay even months before we moved in. And I was writing the check because I do most of the bookkeeping and all of that. And I said, I've never written a check this big before. And his response was, well, baby, we're going to be writing much bigger checks than this. Just you wait. And that has manifested for us to be true. Like, there have been innumerable opportunities that it wouldn't be, that someone would get this. Like, he doesn't meet the criteria. In some ways, he meets or exceeds the eligibility criteria for some things, but some things not. And then he also asks for them to be considerate and offer an extenuating, circumstance, or support an extenuating circumstance. And he's always received it. Yeah. So that is one of the things that I continue to just love and appreciate about him, is that he just believes in his ability. He believes in what he can do. And he goes for it and he asks for what he desires and he gets it because he believes that he's deserving of it.
Yes. He advocates for himself, just like, right? He advocates for himself. He thinks big. He believes in your family, himself and your family. That's amazing. Now, and these are things you continue to love about him. Right? Now, in some relationships, and definitely, certainly in mine and a lot of my clients, what we fall in love with, like the qualities we fall in love with in our spouses, are often the same things that irritate us. Because then this translates. They have these same think big, advocate for yourself qualities in the places you want them to have, but then in the places you don't want them to have. Do you find that to be true? Have you had any examples of that?
Definitely. Because he's a dreamer, because he's a visionary. Oh, I can get this. I can have this. The fine details don't matter. It's almost like they're non-existent. And so where I am very much like, let's do a to-do list. Let's put this timeline together. Okay, I want to start checking things off. He's so much like, okay, well, this is what I want to do. And it's going to happen. At some point, of course, like he's a physician, right? He had to take the same test that I had to take. He had to study for the same, board exams and be successful in many different ways. He had to show up, during rotations, et cetera, has to show up for work. And so he gets things done, but just not in the same way that I do. And that is always a challenge because I am a to-do list person where he's like, yeah, it's going to happen. Like, don't worry about it. It's going to happen. And we've found balance by me just asking, these are the things that we need to do in order to accomplish this goal. Which of these would you like to take on? And can you tell me about when you will have them completed? Most of the time they are. Some of the time they are not. And I send friendly reminders. And sometimes I just take things over. Or what we'll do is I'll say, oh, hey, babe, this one thing I can't do without you. How about we get some sushi and some wine and turn off the TV and let's just get it done. And usually that works, So it's like after he set that deadline, and he's like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, hey, let's set an action date so we can actually get those things done.
So you help, you're supportive, even though he doesn't meet the same type A to-do list timeline, get everything done. He's the visionary. It's going to happen, right? He's going to manifest it. You just support him in that, it sounds like. And this is what you would call financial differentiation in marriage for financial peace.
Yes. Yes.
Is that how will you, and can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. I think oftentimes, and I'm actually working with a client about this, oftentimes, depending on our background, our money beliefs, and how we have created financial operations, especially women in medicine, because we didn't get to a position of medicine, depending on when you get with your spouse, you have this whole history of doing things your particular way, and you have the evidence that it works because otherwise, if you didn't have the evidence, you wouldn't continue to do it that way, right? Where we have evidence-based medicine, evidence-based operations for ourselves. And oftentimes we come into marriage with that perception that this is the right way to do it. Or if we've grown up in a family with a two-parent household like this client of mine, where her father had all of the spreadsheets, did all of the things, and he was the breadwinner. And we know that now more than ever, that there are more households where women are either the breadwinners or they are paid equally to their spouses. And so now we're making the money and we expect that our spouses may manage the money similar to how we manage the money. And that can be extremely challenging when you come with that notion, with that concept of what is correct and what should be done. And oftentimes we marry partners who may be completely different than we are. My spouse is absolutely like on the Myers-Briggs scale. He's the exact opposite from me. And that's what attracted me to him because, he's like, hey, B, let's do this, parasailing. I don't know if I would ever do parasailing. I'm not a big risk taker. I like to know what's going to be on the other side of things. He's more spontaneous in that way. I'm more of a planner. And so I appreciate, obviously, those things, those qualities about him. But in our finances, it's like, hold on, this does not feel comfortable for me, especially coming from, a poverty background, scarcity mindset. I want to know with security that we have our finances in order. And so if I'm projecting upon my spouse for him to operate the same way that I would operate with to-do lists, with having this all worked out, and with doing it the exact same way, using the same methodology for me, then there's likely going to be some resentment when that doesn't occur. And what is imperative for us to understand is that you can still have financial peace in the home, but allow your spouse to operate differently, and that there is no defined, correct way of managing your finances as a single household. There are many ways, and what you have to do is determine what matters most for you and what is going to work for you. I know some people who put all of the money in one pot and they take it out, and they allocate funds that way. I know some people who keep completely separate accounts, and some, the husband may pay this and the wife may pay that. For us, we have a one pot and then we have a separate pot. So I have my own money and he has his own money, but then all of our joint expenses are in one pot. There's no right way to do it. You just have to do it. And when we allow our spouses to operate, because they also had a life before you and they did things a different way, before you all got together. When you can honor and respect that and see the value in that and leverage that, oh, you're actually good with this. How about you plan the vacations? Like, here's the budget. And then that way you don't have to think about planning it. They like to, be spontaneous and you appreciate that. Or, they have a good choice of restaurants and you appreciate that. And so there's ways that we can allow our spouses to be individuals.
Absolutely.
And still accomplish our financial goals.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love it. Yeah. My husband and I have the same thing where most of our paychecks, they all go into our Vanguard investment account. So they're making money. And then we'll pull stuff into our joint checking account to pay things. But then we give ourselves allowances, and actually it's been the same. And I get a little bit more because it's more expensive to be a woman. You know what I mean? You care about your hair and nails and, facial, whatever, And so, no, it is. That's got to be proven somewhere, Brittne.
It is more expensive because of the pink tax, because they actually charge us more for the things because they're buying into that,
You're right. Right. Yeah, we do. And so, so we do give ourselves like our little stipends every month, and it just builds up over time and we spend it whenever. And he doesn't have to see how much I spend on my nails or my hair or clothes or, occasional gifts to somebody else that he might not know, that like my friends or that kind of thing. But yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, you've said so much good stuff. Can you speak a little bit about, does any of this, because I know you work in Boston now, you're an academic hospitalist. Do you bring any of this stuff up at work, or are you involved in any finance stuff at work? Do you talk to like residents or trainees about finances or marriage? Or is this like completely separate?
Kate, how much time do you have?
Let's look at the calendar. I think we're good.
So I'll give you the abbreviated version of this, but really honest. And this is a transition, a mental transition that is still evolving for me. So when I started this financial coaching business, I was actually pulled into it. I paid off my student loans, $138,000 in under 3 years. I actually went back to my credit report. It was 2 years and 9 months because I used to say inaccurately 3.5 years, but 2 years and 9 months.
Wow.
And I began to share my story. I didn't realize how much of a unicorn. I have a 4-year-old right now, and she's all into unicorns. Like how much of a unicorn I was, particular because I didn't come from money, particularly because I'm a Black woman, and we know that Black women carry the largest burden of student loan debt. So I began to share my story just on Instagram, and people were asking, okay, Brittne, how are you doing this? Can you teach me? And I saw that clearly there was a need for additional financial education. There was a need for women to feel safe, to be able to have these money conversations and ask what maybe a financial advisor who's been doing this for X amount of years, maybe who does not look like them or understand their cultural background. If they were to ask that question in that space, then they might feel, I don't know, fill in the word, undeserving, stupid, etc. And so I have allowed to create a safe space for women to ask those questions, for me to also express, like, when I don't know, because I don't know everything, that let's look this up and let's figure out the answer together. And so that's how I was drawn into it. Also now reflecting on who I am and my own scarcity mindset that I had to work through, I see that also manifesting in many of the financial decisions of my clients. And so I began doing this on Instagram, and I'm like, okay, yes, I'm an academic hospitalist in Boston, but none of my colleagues follow me. So it doesn't matter if I'm doing like this thing on the side, because nobody's going to know. And I told my husband that one day. He was like, Brittne, I don't know why you think that you're hiding. Like, you have an open Instagram account. Anyone can find you at any given point. You're not hiding. But for me, I felt like I was, because being a Black woman in medicine from Flint, Michigan, I've also struggled, and this is not the narrative for all Black women who grow up, maybe in an area of marginalized communities, et cetera. But for me, at least, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I've always prided myself on my academic footprint. I went to the University of Michigan and excelled academically, and I didn't choose a smaller school because I wanted a big name school. I went to Northwestern because I wanted a big name school. I went to WashU, and so I've prided myself on my academic footprint. But in this financial space, there's no footprint. There's no academic footprint. There's an experiential footprint of what I've done, what I've learned, and the mistakes that I've made.
Yeah.
But for me, that didn't feel validating enough, because that's not how I've prided myself or given myself worth before. Wow. And so I was not sharing with my colleagues, because I was concerned about how I would be perceived, how my commitment to medicine might be evaluated if they were to know this. And it caused a lot of internal dissonance, a lot of it. Because to be honest, Kate, coaching women, I worked with a woman, and this is a tangent, but she couldn't afford my coaching. And I said to her, I don't ever want a woman to make decisions just based upon cost, because I know what that feels like. So let's be creative. So nonetheless, we were creative together. And through us working together, figuring out that she actually should have been awarded PSLF, loan forgiveness, public service loan forgiveness. We applied, we went through all the loopholes and all of the logistics, and she got $70,000 of student loans paid off because of her work with me. And she was not going to work with me because of cost. Now, just think about that return on investment, right? No, she didn't pay it off herself, but the payoff is not necessarily about who pays it off, just that you reach debt freedom, right? So I get stories like that. I get experiences like that where God is just showing me that I'm supposed to be here. Mm-hmm. But for me, there was still that internal turmoil of, how can I do them both? How can I share this part of myself with the academic community? And a coach that I had, she's like, you're not supposed to be in hiding. Like, God did not design us to hide. And so from that moment, from 2023, I said, okay, I can't hide anymore. I applied to be on the finance committee for the Department of Medicine. And in that, I shared with them that I had an interest of personal finance and that I helped my husband with his private practice, with the bookkeeping and all of the financial management of that. And I was elected. So that was another sign like, okay, you could do this. Now I've revealed to, I'm sorry.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I would elect you too, Brittne.
Thank you, Kate. So now I was elected to be on this finance committee. Now I've revealed to my colleagues, to the Department of Medicine, that I'm interested in finance. And then I just have, started to share. When I introduced myself to my residents, I said, hey, this is what I do. I'm Dr. Halford. This is where I'm from, etc. And outside of medicine, I love personal finance. I always just add that tidbit. It's just me revealing that this is who I am. This is what brings me joy. And when they Google my name and it pops up with, my business and all of that, is by no surprise. So I have recently reached out to one of my colleagues. So for me to give a resident talk, I've spoken back at Northwestern and other institutions. And so I am weaving it in now, and it feels so good. I just received an email, someone who heard me on the White Coat Investor podcast. They're like, hey, can you come and do a grand rounds for us? And so it is happening, and it feels so good to not be in hiding and to be able to blend my identities and embrace the wholeness of who I am.
And this is just the beginning, right? Like, you've done so much already, and this is just the beginning, because you're emerging from when did this happen? When did you start emerging from hiding?
This year. It was 2023. I always choose a word for the year. 2022 was purpose. And this year is just embracing who I am. Yeah.
I love it. And you know what? So I feel like I had, I don't know if you would call it similar or different, but when I started my whole marriage coaching and marriage medicine and money, I documented it, and we had to fill out the COI, conflict of interest form at the university. You kind of have to put, I'm starting a podcast. It makes no money, as a podcast, I don't really monetize the podcast, but the coaching business different. And I'm so into coaching. I coach my residents, I coach my fellows. I'm really not that shy about it. But then one day I went for my annual review, and my boss puts at the end of my annual review, because he knows I'm super into coaching and I've got a podcast, and I'm also one of the, I forget what, it's not the chief wellness officer. It's called, the wellness champion. So I'm the wellness champion of my radiology department with a couple hundred radiologists and professors. And he puts at the end of my review, Kate continues to work on work-life separation. And that just struck, when he said that, I can't even tell you, the emotion was shame. That was the emotion. And I wanted to cry. And so I could barely even speak. And it's just such a general statement, right? It's not but I think I took it to mean so many things. I overshare. I talk too much about this with residents and fellows, personal finance and relationships. And he doesn't know, he's not there. He doesn't, and I do it very tactfully with people who enjoy talking about this. But I can see where we as humans want to hide at first because we're unsure. And when he said that, I was just like, okay, is it time? What is it? Is it time to start hiding more? And I'm just and I spoke with it. I told it to a couple other colleagues. And I even Googled, what is work-life separation?
Unknowing Google.
here we talk so much about work-life balance and work-life integration in 2023. I'm like, work-life separation is more kind of like an 80s or a 90s term. It's like back in the day, I even talked to one of my colleagues who's a couple decades ahead of me. And she's like, okay, you and me, we're just from different generations. We just come to work and we do our work and then we go home. Whereas I feel like this newer wave, not that it's bad, and not that it's bad. I'm not being ageism here, but we're different. We bring more of ourselves to work or wherever we go. There's just like this wholeness aspect of the generation we live in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You feel that?
I do. I do. And I don't simultaneously. Like, I feel like there are certain environments at work which I can really be more of who Brittne is. And I definitely understand how you might be a little bit more protective of some aspects of who you are and not share some things or feel that way based upon that comment. I also had like a visceral response to when you stated it. And then now that the emotions have been dampened or like reconciled a bit, I'm just thinking about, we can interpret, like people say things all the time and then we interpret and filter them, right? And we create these narratives about ourselves. You know this as a coach. So I don't know what he meant, of course, because I'm not the author of that statement. But it could be interesting to have a conversation to really understand what was implied by that statement.
I honestly think it's just, okay, I pay you to read imaging studies, right? So just read imaging studies when you're at work. Don't work on like maybe your outside business stuff. And I totally get that. But when I talk, if I want to talk about personal development and relationships with residents and fellows as part of education, right? Trainee education, wellness, that fits. But I'm not going to like invite you to speak on this podcast while I'm supposed to be reading x-rays.
Right.
So I'm like, that's what I take it. That's how I interpret it after all the feelings settled. And that's where we are. And okay, moving on. I want you to tell me a little bit about your satin lined hair accessories brand for women and children. Is that completely separate? Like, did you do that before the coaching business?
Yes. So, I think maybe because I grew up poor, like I am extremely resourceful. My grandmother was extremely resourceful. And my friends would always say, well, Brittne, you're not supposed to do this way, but it still works. It serves its purpose. Yeah. So a recent example of this is I buy one of those floaties for our children. And who has one of the pumps that actually blows up the inflatable pools? No one. So I took a hair accessories and I took a hair nozzle that had, the pointed funnel top, and I cut a hole in it so that it fit on our air pump our air pump for our blow up mattress. And I taped it around, and then I stuck it in there and I set it down, and it inflated after like 30 minutes. And so I'm always thinking about, how can I be resourceful? How can I solve this problem with what I have on hand so that I don't have to go to the store to purchase anything else? And the hair accessories brand kind of originated from that, in which I was looking. Before this, I had another hair accessories tool that I was working on because my hair is coily and it gets tangled sometimes when it's so coily. And so I wanted to straighten it without heat. So I had all of this experience of doing that business and creating what was called a satin stretch wrap. Had it manufactured in China, was going to be shipped out, and literally the factory burned down, like literally burned down into, flames and ashes. And I was devastated because I had spent so much time and energy, but then God allowed for space with now I have this little one. I have to also comb her coily hair, and I don't always have time. So I have always benefited from hair accessories. You know, you throw your hair into a ponytail, you put a hair accessory on, it just makes it look beautiful. You kind of ordained your hair, adorned your hair in that way. But I couldn't find anything for children. And we know that there are benefits to satin for our skin when we're sleeping, satin pillows, silk pillows. And there are also benefits for satin for hair, specifically, you know, ethnic hair, because it gets drier. And so satin doesn't wick away the moisture. So I couldn't find anything. And I was telling my aunt about this, and she knew how to sew. So she's like, don't worry, let's go to the fabric store. We'll buy some satin, we'll buy some fabric, and we'll create it. And that was the origin of Bramlin and Rose. So our daughter, Brooke, is actually the muse for Bramlin and Rose, and she models for the hair accessories brand. It's currently an Etsy shop.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking on Etsy right now. I'm looking at all your beautiful, this must be your girl in all these pictures, you and her.
Yes. So that's Brooke. But I didn't realize, Kate, that that was another door opening for generational wealth. Because now we have a satin line hair accessories brand, and it's a family-owned brand. But because Brooke models, she's employed by the business. She gets a W-2. She earns a model's wage, albeit it's not a ton of money, but she's 4, right? I didn't earn anything at the age of 4. And because she has earned income, I can invest that money into a Roth IRA. She's not going to pay taxes on it because she's under the standard deduction. And I get a deduction from a business perspective. She gets to invest that money, never pays taxes on it. It grows tax-free. And when she pulls it out, she's going to have the money tax-free as well. If we continue down this road of investing every year because she's earning money every year, then that's going to accumulate a lot of interest over time for her. In addition, because it's a contributory Roth, she can take out any of our contributions and use them for her wedding or to pay her college tuition, etc. And because it's in a Roth IRA, is not going to deduct from her financial aid. Now, I don't know how much financial aid she might get with a 2-parent physician household, but if there were an opportunity there, it would not be considered. So it's just building blocks. Like every step of the way has just been building on the other to give me the experience, the expertise, so that I can actually pass this along to my clients. And so I actually did. I had a client who was established a new practice as a psychologist. And I said, hey, are you employing your children? She's like, no, my CPA didn't tell me about this. I'm like, no, we need to do this now. Here's how you do it. Let me teach you how to invest the money. And she was so, so grateful. And it's these tools of the wealthy, these little hidden nuggets that when we don't have these transparent money conversations, because she actually hired me as her coach because she felt overwhelmed. She deferred all of the financial management to her husband, and she just didn't feel like she had the financial acumen. And so we created a safe space for me to share financial education, for her to ask questions, and for her to just understand that even I don't know it all. And it is okay that you don't know it all. Like you actually don't have to know it all in order to be an expert and to be successful.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You don't have to know it all to be an expert or to be, what did you say, financially successful?
To be financially successful or to be even an expert. You know, even like our experts, if you look at the SPIVA report, the S&P, like it's like a comparative of active index, an active investment versus passive investment. The active investors actually don't outperform passive investments. You know, the S&P 500 just investing in an index fund. Yeah. So, but we give all of this appreciation to their expertise and deference to their expertise, but you don't even outperform like a passive investment strategy. So that's what I mean, that you can still be considered an expert. You can still be an expert or have a level of expertise without knowing all the answers.
Yeah.
You know, own what you know and value that. And really, expert is just a name that we give someone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it. I am just so amazed about all the things you do, and especially this satin, this Etsy shop I'm looking at right now. Like you had to go like patent that or find a way to get that manufactured. And then, then the factory burned down and then you had to go find another factory. And it's just like, this just sounds, it's stressful to me to think about it. But you put it together and you're just amazing, Brittne. Can I just say that again?
Oh, thank you.
Oh
I
my
appreciate
gosh.
it.
And you've shared such amazing stories. Is there anything else we've missed? Like anything else you want to share as it pertains to medicine, marriage, money, finance, even Black women in medicine? How, as a Black, I mean, you shared, as a Black woman, what you've had to do. What about as white women, white men, how we can be more supportive for the path, right? For advocacy. Is there anything else like that you just want to kind of drive home?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that, because I think that there definitely are ways that we can all be allies for each other, even for men, right? Men, they have all of these privileges, but if you think about maybe a man who wants to take an extended paternity leave, like they may not know how to navigate that. So we all have these silos of expertise based upon our experiences and societal perceptions of how to navigate the world. So I think that we can all be allies for each other. And when we think about, so we talked about a little bit about the income gap between women and men, right? That's even more profound for minority women. And if we now take that income gap and we blow it up, that there's a huge disparity as far as a wealth gap. And this is where we can really hone in and make change, is because we're having these conversations now, Kate, and you and I are similar in a way that we are physicians and we're married. And so there are women who are not physicians. There are women who are not married, women who don't have children, that we can all still take this responsibility that sharing financial knowledge, financial acumen, supporting another person towards promotion and making that recommendation is how we're going to start to break this down, how we're going to start to dismantle some of the social societal structures that have been put in place for centuries that progress one group of people forward compared to others. And I think as long as we can all own that this is my responsibility and this is an opportunity here. There's one thing that I've committed to is that I have no regrets. And how I've made that commitment is because anytime there's a trigger in my mind to say, oh, Brittne, you could have done that differently. You could have spoken more softly to your spouse. You could have, not been so harsh towards that nurse. You could have not screamed at your daughter for, dumping all the water or whatever, on the floor. Yeah. Anytime I get that flicker of Brittne, there's an opportunity there. My therapist has told me, Brittne, you can do a do-over. Now, I may not be able to do over to completely erase the pain that I caused, my daughter, or, the impression or the bad emotion that I imposed upon the nurse if I was a little harsher towards her. But what I can do is to acknowledge that there's an opportunity for me to be softer, for me to say things differently, for me to value their expertise and incorporate that into my decision-making. And what I can do is just express that there's some regret there and there's some opportunity for me to do things differently. So I do that. And so I would just encourage anyone, if you're like, oh yeah, my colleague did this really well, after you experience it, if you're going to, a social committee, then if that comes to your mind, then make a recommendation or send an email to your boss. I really enjoyed this. This was very helpful for this reason, and state that so that person can start to get acknowledged. Anytime you hear a financial tidbit and that somebody doesn't know it, share it and pass it along and spread wealth amongst us. It's all of our responsibility.
Yes, there's an opportunity, right? There's an opportunity for personal growth and to support colleagues, to share. So many people just hold on to things. It's like, oh, everybody already knows that. No, not everybody does. And maybe they learned about it a year ago and they forgot. or they haven't heard it the way that you're going to present it or you're going to say.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that is so true. Coming from a different voice, sometimes it just manifests differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell us, where can people find you? And I know you shared the Etsy at Bramelin and Rose. Where else can people find you, Brittne?
Thank you, Kate, so much for having me on this podcast. I have enjoyed our conversation and learning from you. Oh my gosh. So people can find me on my website, More Joy, More Wealth. That order is very strategic and it's based in evidence. And I really believe when you focus on joy, you do have more money. So more joy, more wealth. And you can also find me on Instagram, Brittne, Brittne Halford. I'm not hiding there, or find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll put those links in the show note. And yes, we're all going to start following now, Brittne Halford, unless they already have. And that's how they found Medicine, Marriage, and Money. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I have really, really enjoyed being here.
Oh my gosh, what an amazingly powerful interview with Dr. Brittne Halford. It's going to be hard for me to nail down 3 of my take-home points. And I think I'm just going to start from the beginning. So number 1, when it comes to being submissive for our spouse or for somebody else in a relationship, I thought her just take on this was amazingly powerful when she talks about personal fulfillment and serving others. So when you think about it, as a physician, we serve others on a daily basis. We don't go to work because we feel so much better or because we feel like it's going to make us healthier, right? We go to work to make others healthy. We really lay ourselves down to help our patients, to get them well, to get them the latest, most up-to-date treatments. Like we are basically, and if you want to look at it like this, if you study the Bible or you have a strong faith, we are a servant for our patients. Now, does that mean we are below them? Does that mean that we are selfless? Does that mean that we feel less of ourselves or we have to sacrifice going to the bathroom or eating or sleeping? Absolutely not. Because serving our patients, just like serving our spouse, is reciprocal. Our patients come in because they're sick. And what do we get in return? Well, we get multiple things. Not only do we get a paycheck, whether that's from our patients or from their insurance plans, but we also get personal, professional fulfillment. We have spent our whole lives, devoted our whole education to learning about how to treat people, right? There are some academic physicians who spend 10 years on research papers in order to make peanut allergies less of a risk for the entire world, right? Especially in first world countries where peanut allergies are insanely high. So when we think of speaking to our spouse with more love, or more servitude or more just less, or what could say a less harsh tone, we're not just doing it for them. Are we doing it for them? Yes. But we're also doing it for ourselves. Because do we want to yell? Do we want to be angry? Do we want to have better control over our own emotions? Are we going to regret something we say? And it may not be served, you may not be served well that same day, as Brittne brought up. Maybe it's going to be in a week, in a month, in a year, right? Maybe you and the influence you create in your family, in your circle, just like the influence you create out in the world and in your hospital, is different than any sort of convincing that you may be trying to do in the heat of the moment. It's the way you live your life. And their job is to love you in return. I would think we could say the same in reverse. They are nice to you. They speak to you in a nice tone. They watch what they say, right? We usually fall in love with somebody not because they're mean to us, but because they actively are trying their best to love, to serve as well. And we often, even though fall in love with somebody who might be the opposite, like Brittne's husband, we have similar core values. When you are in a relationship that lasts, you often have similar core values. And so the love you give is matched, if not exceeded, by the love you receive or you get in return. That is beautiful. Number 2, Brittne shared with us an article she recently read in New England Journal of Medicine about how breadwinners do more in the home. The female physician breadwinners, they just do more in the home. Women, we have this, the feminine innate tendency is to take care of the home, the kids, more than the masculine. They're usually out, right? And roles are reversing. This is not black or white, but it has been shown. Women have a mental workload. They have anticipatory needs. They look out for the entire family that men don't necessarily hold all the time. They may be more focal, right? Focal doers, thinkers, whereas women are more multifocal, more diffuse. Okay, so when we choose to go into roles that interest us, and maybe it's not research, maybe it is financial wellness. If you're anything like me, it's social engagement groups that have less benefit, direct benefit to you, as in you're less likely to get promoted, you're less likely to get pay increase. The fact of the matter is you are increasing the entire value of the business, the hospital with which you are working in, the private practice, the academic setting. You are increasing the overall value. So it is our duty to advocate and to show others of that if they are blind to it, to ask for others to value our time the same way we value the time of people who are promoted for different things, whether it's being the chief or the chair or the residency program director. It's different, and it's also valuable. And number 3, a super, super important point Brittne brings up is Black women carry the largest burden of student loan debt in America, and maybe even outside of America. Black women carry the largest burden of student loan debt. Understanding why that is, maybe we'll take a little bit of education. Maybe you want to read up on that. Maybe you want to listen to a podcast or read a book or read some articles about why that is and what we can do or you can do. You know, how you can create circles for women, Black women specifically, to feel safe, to bring these topics up, to be financially savvy, to accumulate more wealth, to think like the wealthy. We can all be allies for one another to bridge this wealth gap, and acknowledging that it exists is definitely the first step. I don't think if you're listening to this that you have a problem with acknowledging that. I think most of you listening probably just want to know what you can do to help, right? Be allies for one another. If you learn something, share it. Share it with a colleague. Share it with a Black woman in medicine. Share it on your Instagram or your Facebook for everybody to see, whether Black, white, Asian, brown. Share your financial acumen and help bring others up. Create that safe space for difficult conversations. Ask the questions. And with that, my friends, if you found at least one piece of helpful information in this podcast, and with speaking to Dr. Brittne Halford, or on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, please share. Give us a rating, subscribe, 5-star review, rating, ask us, share this episode with a colleague or a friend who might need to hear this advice from me or Dr. Brittne Halford. And with that, please go have a beautifully lovely day with less scarcity and more joy and more wealth. So much love to you and your family. If you are finding the concepts I teach in these episodes useful and want more in-depth and personalized support for your relationship, consider this your invitation to join me in creating the most connected and intimate relationship with your spouse that you could dream of. Go to www.medicinemarriageandmoney.com right now and download my 18-page medical marriage survival guide and workbook at no cost to you. I also have a 6-day marriage challenge, which goes over the 6 predictors of divorce at no cost to you. These have been known to decrease fighting, rumination, and grudges between you and your loved one. If you want to take it a step farther, really enhance the joy and connection in the most intimate relationship in your life, sign up for my 8-week Making Marriage Work program today at medicinemarriageandmoney.com. Thanks for leaving us a stellar review, subscribing, and sharing with your friends on social media. You have the power to improve someone else's life and marriage simply by sharing this episode. Much love to you and your spouse. You're exactly where you need to be in this moment. Adios, my friends. The content of this episode is not intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or financial advice. The opinions provided on this episode are those of myself or the invited guest alone. They do not represent the opinions of any particular institution. Always seek the advice of your physician or financial advisor with any questions you may have of a medical condition or financial plan. This is for your entertainment only.